No worries. No worries.
But
Um,
I'm gonna.
Here, how are you?
How are you?
Good, good. You excited? We're right in here. We're getting ready to roll.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I'll sort of dive right in because I'm teaching another class at 5, so I want to dive right into it and kind of share a few things with you guys. So let me run through a few slides, and then and I'll try to get through everything I can, and then let you guys kind of run the workshop from there, if that makes sense.
Okay. Sounds
Perfect. So I'm going to open up my slides here really quickly and run through this stuff a little bit. So generally speaking, the things I wanted to cover with you guys is, number one, this concept of the golden rules. And so I'll talk about those. And then we'll talk about kind of this concept of the story inventory and the story framework. And really, what I'm going to be doing with you guys over the next 4 weeks is really giving you kind of 4 different writing approaches or techniques you can apply to kind of find what works for you. Because most people have not written this much content before. So finding your own sort of approach that works for you is partially what we're doing here. And so this will be the first one of sort of 3 other ones that we'll do after that one. So the first thing I like to talk about is the concept of the golden rule of authorship. And the reason I say it is because people oftentimes are like, well, what does it take to succeed and make sure you do this? So the big milestone that we're going to have coming up is we have this sort of step in here about 10 weeks from now called the pre-approval step. And really what that is basically at the end of writing sort of 10 weeks of stories, the goal here is to create as much raw content as you can and kind of be making progress. And so at that point, what's going to happen is your editor is basically going to submit you to the publisher and basically submit you for pre-approval. So approval will happen after the manuscript phase, kind of the end of June, but pre-approval is a step to sort of say, hey, Deanna has created some good stuff. I think she's on the pace to publish this thing. What that means is basically then you have the opportunity to start the publishing stuff, like work on covers, all that sort of stuff, to start a little bit early on it. So what happens is like about 2/3 of people get pre-approved. And so I want to figure out, so I started 24 people in September, and 15 of them were pre-approved, and the other 9 of them who submitted their manuscripts this week got approved in the second batch. So nothing wrong with it, just sort of the key thing to know. So what was the one thing that all 15 of the people who were pre-approved had in common? The one thing they had in common was that all of them submitted at least one story in their first 2 weeks to their editor. That was it. So the biggest reason I think that's important to know is that people oftentimes will get in their own head being like, oh, I don't know what to write yet. I'm not sure I'm ready yet. I'm busy. And the core thing that I would say is just create. Don't worry if it's bad, but understand that the goal here is creating something for your editor. Because really, the editor really is a powerful tool for you to keep making progress along the way. So that's the big thing is whatever your style is, your approach is, just create, because I think that will help you get over the line. And Deanna, as you found working with your editor, it's kind of a powerful person that can be helpful in that way. So just don't get in your own head. Don't feel like it's not ready yet. I need to do more interviewing. Just create something, get feedback on it, and you'll find that that'll help you kind of progress. So just thought I would throw that one out there for sure. And Deanna, you can share more about her experiences working with her editor and stuff like that. But basically, they're there to cheerlead you and help make sure you get across the line. So we're going to talk a little bit about stories. And, one of the core things we'll be doing for the next 10 weeks is writing stories. And so people always ask me, what is a story? Or sometimes we'll call it a scene if you're doing fiction. But for the most part, what is a story? Or a poem if you're doing poetry? These are really these nuggets of pieces that you're going to create, kind of just individual creation pieces to get feedback. We're going to create a bunch of them over the next few weeks together. But I like to use this example from this guy, Christopher Booker. And so kind of awesome that a guy named Christopher Booker wrote a book about books. But he basically analyzed thousands of stories from movies, film, TV, everything, books, to decide how we write stories. And what he found is there's 7 plots that we use to tell almost every story out there. So we'll get back to this in a little bit more, but I like his definition of describing a story. And what he says is this. He says, however many characters may appear in a story, its real concern is with just one, its hero or heroine. It is with he whose fate we identify as we see him gradually developing towards the state of self-realization, which marks the end of the story. So basically what that means is there's some kind of growth or learning that happens over the course of the story for our hero. And so the core thing to know is that when you think about writing stories, there's sort of 3 big parts to think about. Number 1, we've got our hero. Number 2, there's some kind of learning or growth that we want to show that our hero went through. And number 3, we want to basically have a structure that we do those stories. And so again, part of the big reason I sort of talk about this and teach this is that I want to help you guys move from writing term papers into stories and scenes. And it's just not we don't write in this way normally. So it is one of those things that can be a little awkward when you get started. And so that's kind of why I like to spend some time on it. And the big difference here really is that, like, from a term paper narrative style into stories, is that stories include a lot more dialogue and quotes. Like, you'll see that you'll use way more of it to really make sure you're communicating that way. More descriptive elements. So, we're taught to write very concisely when we write, generally speaking, but descriptive elements are, the room looked this way, describing the character, like going into those details that add richness to it. And the last one is depth. Those ideas where you go deeper on the lesson, you add statistics and you add references and you add kind of things that help us go much deeper than just kind of surface level, here's what I saw. And so we call these the 3Ds. These are really the core that I've learned at helping young writers kind of create book content, is that they need much more of the 3Ds. And so that's really one of the big things you're going to see from your editor. They'll be reading your stuff and giving you feedback on how to add more dialogue, how to go deeper on the descriptive, and how to add depth in those pieces. So expect a lot of that as you're seeing it. That's really what they're reading for. They're not giving you like commas and, how to dangling participles. They're much more there to help you make sure your story quality improves. And again, what you'll find is on average over the course of this book, your average story length will be about 700 to 800 words. That's kind of the length. But some could be much shorter, 250 to 500 words, and some could be longer, the 1,200 to 25 or 2,000 words. A lot of the things you'll find is when you write your first stories is they will be on the shorter end, largely because you don't incorporate as much of the 3Ds. And that's really what you'll find, is you can very quickly take a story that's 400 words and add some of the 3Ds and find it to balloon up to 800 to 1,000 words, pretty much like this. So the core thing to know is that your goal is to write 20,000 words of stories. And again, these are first drafts. That's what we're trying to get you to, because that's going to form the basis of your book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. That's going to be the core piece. And again, the goal to know is we're going to do it over the next 10 weeks. So that means on average, you'll be sort of shooting to create about 2,000 words a week. So that sort of means if you run the math, it's about like, 2 to 4 stories per week will keep you on pace. Now, again, you'll approach whatever your style is to get there. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm behind this week. What does that mean? Like, again, it's just a guide, a rough guide to sort of know where you're taking these things. So here's the key thing that means for you. We can help you. I can help you take mediocre stories and make them great. The problem is I cannot take non-existent stories and make them great. So the core reason I say this is, like, you just need to create, and don't judge yourself and don't beat yourself up. The most important thing is to get it out there. Remember the golden rule, right? Get something to your editor in these first 2 weeks, and that will keep you humming along. Because remember, the idea here of taking okay stories and making them great, you're going to get a lot of feedback from me, from your editor, from advanced readers, from a copy editor. You got plenty of people who are going to touch this. And so remember, just focus on creating. Like, take something, get it off your desk and move it over, and keep repeating that over and over again. That's kind of the core of it. So I want to talk a little bit about this concept called the story inventory, because one of the things that people sometimes wrestle with is, is the difference between preparing to write and writing, right? Like, I'm the type of writer that, like, when I'm inspired to write, I'll write a bunch, right? If I get inspired at 10 o'clock at night, I'll stay up until 5 a.m. and just crush out a ton of stuff. But if I'm not inspired, I won't do it. But how do you keep making progress even if you're sort of not able to carve out time to write or do those sorts of things? And that's one of the core things I'm going to talk about here with this concept of the story inventory. So let me take you into Quip here for just a second and show you around a little bit of this sort of thing. And so I'm going to take you through kind of an example of how this works. So this is sort of the Quip room for you guys for the Liberty program. And so I'm going to take you into the session materials and then the create stories sessions. And so I put these 2 documents in here for you guys that we're going to use today. And you'll use them throughout the experience to try and do some of these pieces. But this is the first sort of tool set that we're going to use. And so I'm going to take you into this concept called the story inventory. So when you're going to try this out today, or whenever you try it out, what you're going to do is you're going to basically create a copy of this one. So I'm going to basically copy the document, and I'm going to leave it in this folder for you to see. But I'm going to do a story today about Hasan Minhaj, story example grad school. So I'm going to basically create this one. Again, that's the story I'm going to try and write. And so each of you should try a couple examples today. But let me show you a little bit of how this template works. So I'm going to use this to populate it. So there's sort of 2 parts of it. One is kind of the story part where you're going to write the story. And below is the inventory where you're going to kind of like organize yourself to write. Again, you may find this is too formulaic for you or you don't want to do this, but try it out for at least one time to see how it is. It'll just be a tool to sort of use. So remember what I talked about, how to write a story. There's kind of 3 big things I want you to be doing. Who is the hero? What's the key lesson or the takeaway, the learning? the story structure, and then the 3Ds. I'm going to start by populating these first three ones a little bit. So for the hero in this case, remember, Hasan Minhaj is going to be my person. Now, you may have heard me talk about him before. He's basically a comedian, and he's someone who was on The Daily Show. He's someone who has gone and now he was hosted the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He's a Pakistani guy, and now he has a show on Netflix called The Patriot Act. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some background information, some links and some stuff about him. So for example, I'm going to maybe put his Wikipedia page. And remember, I'm just putting examples here. Normally, I would put the actual stuff that I was doing. But his Wikipedia page, his LinkedIn, his About Me page. And then I'll put some details in here, the background stuff. So I might want to put that he was born in 1991. I'm not sure if that's real. He grew up in California, son of immigrants, went to UC Davis, first job in IT, and got accepted to law school, but deferred. And then became, sort of a journalist or on Daily Show and White House Correspondents' Dinner host. And then some links to the content I'm using. So this is a secondary interview. So I did a podcast with Gary Vee that I used. I also did, an interview that he gave, and I saw his Twitter and YouTube. So remember, you can put the actual links of the stuff that you actually used here. So that's the first stuff, kind of my background material, my hero that I'm going to use. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about my lesson. So for me, the lesson that I wanted to use with my Hasan story is basically that you can create your own graduate degree. So what the story is of Hasan Minhaj that I wanted to tell is that his parents really wanted him to go to law school, and he did not want to go. So he kept deferring and deferring and deferring. He really wanted to break into comedy. And so one day he decided that he was going to basically go out and create a YouTube channel to create some comedy work and stuff like that out there. Tried it. It was not very good. So then he took some of the money that his parents had set aside for law school and invested it in creating higher quality YouTube content. Well, lo and behold, when he auditioned for The Daily Show, they loved his YouTube channel, and that was part of the reason he got hired as the youngest sort of correspondent on The Daily Show. So that's a story that I want to show in that way. So then I want to go down to my 3Ds, and I want to basically put in some 3Ds. So in this case, I'm going to actually paraphrase the quotes here that I would use, but I'm going to put some quotes that I have. So a quote from Hasan about his parents wanting him to go to law school. A quote from Jon Stewart about why they hired Hasan on YouTube. And I'm going to put a quote from his parents, from him about his parents hating his YouTube channel, right? Just some quotes of things that I pulled from before. Then I'm going to put some descriptive elements. So I'm going to describe him a little bit. I'm going to say he's well manicured, beard, thin, and very kind of fast talking. Then I'm going to put some stuff about sort of the physical descriptors, some office, some places. So the UC Davis coffee shop where he got his start. And then I'm going to do and put some, I'm going to talk about some examples of the first bad YouTube videos. And I can put more things, but again, I'm adding descriptive elements. Again, remember I could write more here. And then I'm going to add some depth. And so the depth things I'm going to do could be statistics, commentary from experts, quotes from research. So one is I'm going to do is there's 73,000 graduate degrees per year. Maybe an expert story about how someone else used YouTube to break in. And then maybe an expert quote from someone about graduate school, a professor. So what I've got here now is, again, I've got basically an inventory that I can use to help me write, right? So these are sort of the pieces I have here, and I'll show you just a little bit more. So I'm going to blaze because I only have 4 minutes left. So I'll go very quickly, and you'll see how this thing is, and then you can run through it here. So let me walk back into the slides here for a quick thing, and I'm going to go through this fast. All right, so Christopher Booker, right? Remember I told you how he broke the world down into these sort of 7 books, 7 story plots. So there's this formula that we're going to use to write stories. So remember, three things. A hero. We've identified our hero, Hasan Minhaj. Generally, it's going to be you or the person you interviewed or the person you researched to be your hero. And the lesson, I want this story to be a lesson of or an example of or a story about blank. What is the thing you want to learn? And then the structure. Now, here's the cool part. Christopher Booker has basically broken down 7 types of plots for us, and we're going to use these to our advantage. So the first one that he has is called Overcoming the Monster. Now, you've probably heard this if you've seen a Marvel movie or Star Wars, basically the story of our hero triumphing over a monster. So basically, he breaks it down by these steps. So in the plot steps, it goes like this. The hero learns about the monster. He trains for battle. The monster is revealed to him. Then he loses the battle. He tries a different approach and defeats the monster, right? Like, sound familiar, right? You've seen this movie before. And it doesn't have to be like the traditional hero, but for me, my monster in this story was actually my legal secretary. So this is a way to show how this can overcome. I'll show you a couple other ones. Rags to riches. This is an example where Cinderella, right? Terrible early life, receives the call to leave, minor struggles, hits rock bottom, defeats the crisis, and wins and gets a reward. So doing something that makes you uncomfortable, showing you're vulnerable and you can overachieve something like that. Third one here is a voyage and return. This is an example where, you're living the unadventurous life, you're transported to another world, you explore the new surroundings, you feel uncomfortable, you're confronted with darkness, you escape the evil, and you return home the wiser, right? And this is a powerful one to show that you went out, learned something, and brought it back and improved. So again, an example could be going off to college and bringing that knowledge back, or going to a conference and bringing that, or traveling somewhere and bringing that back, or even going to a restaurant and having a dinner with someone that changes your way of thinking and bringing that knowledge back. That's kind of the way you can use this plot. Some of the other ones I'll go through quickly. The quest, this is a team one that you would do. The comedy shows how you can succeed even through like challenging periods. The tragedy shows how you fail, how someone fails at something. And the story arc here is the rebirth. If you take the evil path, the dark path, the path that's not sort of like, you did what you shouldn't, and then you learn from it and try it again. So these are all the story arcs that you have. So again, Deanna will post all these examples for you in the room. So let me show you how we're going to do this. So I'm going to go back in here to my story from Quip. Now, remember what I've done here is I've decided in this case, I'm going to use the Overcoming the Monster story structure. So that's what I'm going to use. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into our shared room here in this way, and I'm going to go into the 7 basic story plots. So you see here in this document, what I've got is I've got all of the 7 plots at the top. So Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, Quest, Voyage, Return, Comedy, Tragedy, Rebirth. And each of them have the steps along the way. So what you'll do is you'll basically go in and copy these steps just like this. So I'm just going to copy them, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to basically go into my story. Now what I'm going to do is down here, I'm going to basically paste these. So paste special and match style. And then I'm going to basically kind of outline my story based on what I have. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly, but you'll see it and you guys can do an example here. So I'm going to start by taking my background information, right? I've got this guy here who I've got my stuff that I could write about him that has my facts on him. So my introducing the hero. Then I'm going to set the monster as his parents. That's going to be the parents. So I'm going to basically make his monster the parents and talk about a quote about him, his parents wanting him to go to law school. So this kind of hints at the story here. And then the dream stage where he says, like, maybe I want to be a comedian. And so I'm going to maybe add the story about, or this content about the UC Davis coffee shop example. So I'll put that there. Then this frustration stage, he confronts the monster when he launches his, when he basically starts his job. Maybe we'll move this down here where his first job was in IT. So I'll basically put that here. Then I'll put in here a little more, the story piece about where he's sort of in this confrontation and his quote from his parents hating his YouTube channel. Oops, hating his YouTube channel in this case. And I'll paste that in here. So I'll put that right here. And then finally, I'm going to put this miraculous escape and show, tell the story here about how Jon Stewart hired him because of this, and some other pieces. So I'm going to put some descriptors about him being well manicured. And so maybe I'll put this here, this kind of like idea, talking more descriptive about him. Maybe again, I'll put the examples of the first bad YouTube videos here that he did, his, this sort of some examples that I have. And then I've got some stats. So I want to do some stats here to talk about some stats and research. So about, how his parents wanted him to go to school. So I'll put the quote about graduate school. I'll put some expert stuff about how someone else had used YouTube to break in and talk about his strategy here. and I'll do some other pieces here. This expert about, graduate school and something like that. So again, now what I've got here is I basically have the outline of a story. I've got like all the pieces here to fill in. So when you go to write, you can basically either just write the sections here and sort of start writing right in it, or you can basically just kind of start above the top and start writing. So that is basically the example here of this. Deanna, I think, has been doing it a little bit. She can talk about it. But the idea here is to sort of help people think in terms of these concepts of like using these plot structures, using the inventory to help you write, and see if this gives you a tool. And try it out. If you hate it, no big deal. We got 3 other ones to try. But you'll find that just thinking in plots, thinking in all the content you want to capture can be a great way to make some progress. So this gives some good stuff to start with?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, I'll let you guys take a stab at it, and I'll see you all next week then.
All right, thank you.
Bye, guys.